need this. So what we're after today is to outline the new mandated process and rules we are required to work within. There's going to be a constant theme throughout today's presentation about rules and requirements that we are trying to work within. We're quite limited in scope and the influence we have in the speed management plan space. We want to confirm priorities for the initial speed management plan for 2024 to 2027, seek feedback on the speed limit changes suggested, seek further feedback on what priorities for future programs should be, and a bit of feedback on how we are thinking to approach consultation with the community on this. So we're going to cover why we're doing this, broad timelines, the 10-year vision, principles and objectives, and the 2024-27 program and priorities. The rules we need to follow, focus areas, the program after the one we're coming to talk to you about and what we think will be in that one. And would like your feedback on if there's any areas that we've missed in terms of speed management that you'd like us to put our focus on. So an SMP, speed management plan, the overall objective is to improve road safety, reduce death and serious injuries. It's a new legislative process introduced by the Ministry of Transport last year. So it's a mandated process created by Waka Kotahi. So Waka Kotahi mandated by the law to basically set the process for managing speed management plans. You could say that a lot of the reasoning behind this new legislative change is to ensure there's consistency across the country in how speed limits are set. There were changes to the speed limit rules in 2017, which sought much the same outcomes as being sought with the guidance of the current SMPs, but this process doesn't allow for variation from councils or road controlling authorities. It's extremely prescriptive. And we are required as a road controlling authority to complete the process. We can't opt out. I'm not sure what would happen if we would opt out, but I'm not recommending we try and find out. So the timeline, currently, and from April, we've been engaging with iwi partners and other key stakeholders, including schools and NZ Police. All road controlling authorities, so all councils within the Horizons district will be undertaking similar engagement activities at the time. Now, between now and June/July, we'd like to have the draft SMP approved by council for public consultation, and again, everyone else in the region, and will either have been doing it beforehand or will be doing it at the same time. So I think a little thing to note is that we are looking at the speed management plan for 24-27. There are some councils who have gone out and done interim speed management plans to go in before, kind of like a long-term plan amendment for speed management plans. They want to get in because there's certain requirements that councils have to have met by end of June 2024, which we've already met, which is around speed limits to do around schools. So November, December, we are hoping to have the draft speed management plan finalised following public consultation and the speed management plan submitted to Waka Kotahi for certification. So our speed management plan goes to Horizons, and Horizons have to collate all the different council speed management plans into one regional speed management plan, which will be quite a task, and we're trying to work with the other councils to ensure that the speed management plans are in similar sort of formats, so Horizons can actually do that without too much trouble. And then the Regional Transport Committee will approve the draft regional speed management plan, or potentially go back to individual RCAs to ask for inconsistencies with the rules to be addressed. Public consultation on the draft regional speed management plan, if necessary, which it's a little bit unclear at this stage whether that will or not be necessary at the regional level. Now, May 2024 is when the Regional Transport Committee, when Horizon's sort of planning for the Regional Transport Committee to adopt the final Regional Speed Management Plan and submits it to Waka Kotahi for certification, and speed management plans implemented following certification. So broadly, none of the speed management plans, none of the changes become law until they get to the Minister of Transport who works for Waka Kotahi, and then he approves it going into what's called the National Speed Limit Register, which is kept in like a GIS, like a Google Maps sort of thing, and it just shows across the country what all the speed limits are. Neither at the local or the regional level are the legal speed limits set. It's only when it gets to the central government level after it's been filtered up through the regional councils. So Horizons have progressed a little bit in developing some visions, principles and objectives for the speed management plan. We are proposing to adopt those vision, principles and objectives for our own speed management plan. So broadly, the vision is to have a region that connects central New Zealand and supports safe, accessible and sustainable transport options. Improving our road infrastructure as well as setting and enforcing safe and appropriate speeds are key to achieving Vision Zero in Aotearoa, where no one is killed or seriously injured on our roads. Speed management is a fundamental component of the Road to Zero strategy. So there's 4 principles here. It's a bit tight even for my eyes to read that, but it's broadly working together with all aspects of the system and the other road controlling authorities to ensure consistency. So we're working with New Zealand Police in terms of enforcement. We're working with other councils to ensure there's consistency, as well as roads that are crossing boundaries are consistent, so there's not sudden changes on the same roads, that sort of thing. Matching the road to the life around it. So in the past, roads were categorised solely based on how many vehicles travelled on them. We're currently changed the categorisation system, which I won't go into depth about, but the roads are now categorised by what sort of activity is happening on the road. So you can have a category of road called a main street, for example, like on Oxford Street or Foxton Main Street. You can have an activity street where something very busy is happening and the throughput of the road isn't necessarily the most important part of the road. Supporting our well-being. So it's generally safer roads are more attractive for alternative forms of transport like walking and cycling, and keeping us safe, which is quite self-explanatory. So these are the detailed objectives. So I'll just quickly read through those. So under keeping us safe, we want a network that's safe for all users, and the speeds are appropriate and decrease impact speeds and crash forces to reduce deaths and serious injuries. Working together, speeds on the region's transport systems are supported by clear and consistent regulation, communication, community collaboration, and infrastructure monitoring. Supporting our well-being, speeds provide for a connected regional transport network that is safe, functional, reliable, and resilient. Matching the road and the life around it, speeds are integrated with current and future land use support to support well-connected communities that are livable and enable people to travel safely.
Just to interrupt, James, one of the words that was used in the past, which I don't see now, is about efficiency. So the roading network recognising that efficiency is a key principle. In other words, as speedy as possible in order that the commerce and so on can operate. And it just doesn't figure here. And I see when it flows on down through later slides, there are some suggested speeds which are pretty slow and probably meet these sorts of things. But what about the efficiency angle? So could I just flag that as probably a question as to why it doesn't seem to figure anymore?
Yeah. Gosh. I think that's valuable feedback. Thank you. I suppose the question is, would the council support generally if we look to alter perhaps some of the strategic side of our speed management plan to incorporate something around efficiency and how we approach prioritising the speed management plans? I suppose it might be worth us discussing this in a little bit more detail once we've got to the end of it, so we can really cover off what our ability to actually decide is. Yeah.
Yeah, and happy to do that, James. But to me, by planting that into the conversation, it creates a healthy tension, efficiency and safety, and it gives you the two important lenses to look at the speed settings through.
Certainly. Okay. So the program priorities, so these are priorities that we are looking to make in the first 24-27. So something that we have somewhat control over is we don't get to decide necessarily, we don't have a lot of wiggle room in what the changes are, but we have a lot of say in when the changes are made. So I think all of the changes need to be made by the third SMP, into the third SMP. So we've got three-year terms to generally make the changes as prescribed. So we get to decide when we make these changes in which particular term.
Does that mean we still have to do the work now, or can we just delay a whole lot of work?
There are some rules about we have to meet some key specifics in this first 3 year. We can't make no changes until the final speed management plan, or 3 SMP's time, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, so because I guess I just want to cut to the chase in terms of what are we obliged to do right now, and then obviously the second column, which is what could we do if we elected to do.
Okay.
But, I'm particularly interested in focusing on what it is we're obliged to do right now.
Right.
Not saying you curtail the presentation, but
it's entirely fine.
So part of what we are obliged to look at is speed limits around schools. So that is one of the priorities that we've put up here. We have also looked at, and it is a little bit of an unknown area given that this is a brand new process. Nobody has actually gone completely through the process and had a speed management plan certified, so we don't quite know where it's sitting. But we've actually done our best to look at what other councils are doing and keep ourselves in line, so we're not aiming to do more than what other people are doing, but we also don't want to do kind of nothing. So this is where we've kind of analysed our options and come up with these suggestions for priorities.
So focused on, for local roads, so small quiet roads, we're looking at roads that really you'd struggle to do more than 30 consistently. Like if you do 30 on these roads that we're proposing, you feel pretty uncomfortable. So they're roads that suit themselves to it. They're not really a controversial change. They're not big wide roads where people comfortably sit at 50. They're kind of narrow, tight local roads that really naturally have a lower operating speed.
James, to what detail will you go to those? Because in the beach communities especially, there's a huge amount of little short streets that have no footpaths and very narrow. But and people wouldn't go much more than 30. Are we going to go to the expense of putting a 30k sign at the start of each one of those, or is there some common sense comes with us?
Yeah, not. In terms of how we do try and keep some efficiency in where we set the areas. So we'd we're looking at areas to drop to a speed limit rather than one road is this, one road is that, one road is that. But in saying this, we're not guaranteeing that every road that would be narrow road and no footpath we're going to include in this SMP. We are somewhat constrained by our own resource on able to undertake this work. It's very tight time frames, a lot of other pieces of work we're working on at the moment. But we've identified some that we think lend themselves well to a speed limit like this that we're proposing. So improving safety on main streets and schools. So this is areas where we think there's quite a lot of conflict between vehicles and kids walking around or crossing the road or being dropped off, or main streets where you get a lot of people crossing the road, and it's an area where we think it would just pay to have some the safety improvements would actually potentially have some tangible safety benefits. Speed limit changes, I mean. There's anomalies in our old bylaws that got translated into the National Speed Limit Register. So there's some roads that the speed limit, the legal speed limit, does not match the posted speed limit. So we're going to sort that out. Yeah.
Do you want feedback on this right now, or do you want us to wait to the end?
Let's wait to the end.
It would. I think you've seen our presentation. I have tutted with it a little bit. I haven't changed the content. I've just tried to make it a little bit tidier. But it might help to put some time aside at the end, if that's all right. I'm happy if you have a burning question that can't wait, though. Okay, so Waka Kotahi have done an interim speed management plan. So they've gone in before the 24-27, which I think they've finished consultation on and are beginning to implement. In our region, they're looking at a variable speed limit like the State Highway 57, State Highway 56 intersection north of Shannon. So that's similar to the flashing lights you see at the Rangiotu State Road, State Highway 1 intersection north of Foxton. Reduction in speed on State Highway 57 from Heatherley East Road to Shannon to 90 from 100. So outside state, St Mary's School in Foxton on State Highway 1, they're looking at a variable 30 km per hour speed limit, so to have the lights that flash up when it's school time. School pick-up and drop-off hours, not right through the day. At Puratawhao School, 60 km per hour variable speed limit on State Highway 1. And Opiki School at State Highway 56, a 30 km per hour variable speed limit. This one's a little bit tricky for us because I won't get into much of the detail, but we've got an entrance on Tane Road to this school, and the regulations around how the school entranceway sits means that our bit needs to be permanently 30 for the area around the school, but there's going to be variables 30, so it's going to be kind of tricky to go from permanent 30 to variable 30, because we'd have to put a 100k sign up if it's going into the 100k sign. And anyway, we're working through that. State Highway 57, Shannon School, 30 km per hour speed limit. You can access Shannon School, I think, from the main road. The main entrance is Grey Street, I believe. But I think you can get to the pool from the main. Yeah. Yeah. I've actually got. Yeah. I think you can, but it's like anyway. And Tokomaru School, 30 km per hour variable speed limit on State Highway 57. Yeah, it is. So broadly, to answer the question, they set out some regulations, and basically, if you can get off the road to park and drop off, and you're not in like a roadside park, they say that you can look at a higher speed limit. Yeah, we can submit and on the consultation, but it's up to the. I think the consultation is closed, and we did submit on it. Yeah, okay, we submitted on it. Yeah. Okay, now Justine is going to take us through the rules.
Right, so one of the things to note is that these rules are set by Waka Kotahi, and when we're going to look at these and exactly what the rules are, we're not looking to make all of these changes in the first 3-year speed management plan program. So the first rule is in relation to local streets. So this is an example of Waitako Street in Manukau. These streets are predominantly residential access, and it's where we live our lives and facilitate local community access. So the rule is that these streets will all eventually go to 30 kilometres an hour. In general, and we will go through a couple of the other exceptions, what that means is everywhere that is currently at 50 is likely to go to 30 eventually, unless there is a change to the rules later on. So this is one of the exceptions, which is activity streets. So these provide access to shops and services. So people spend time here working, shopping, eating, residing and undertaking recreation activities. The speed limit here can be either 30 or 40 kilometres an hour with a default of 30 kilometres an hour. For it to be 40, it needs to have an on-street cycle lane or separated cycle facility. And so an example is Bath Street. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
If you want to go fast on the roads, we should put in more cycle lanes. It sounds great to me. It's just a bit of paint. Jimmy promised me some paint, almost a year ago now. So,
All right, so the next type of road are urban connectors. So these are safe, reliable and efficient movement of people from A to B. And the default speed limits is 40 kilometres an hour for these. So you can have a speed limit of 60. They prefer that we wouldn't have any speed limits of 50. So it's either 40 or 60. And for it to be 60, it needs to have a continuous formed footpath, be median divided, not be residential, have a separated cycle facility and no on-street parking. So an example of this is Cambridge Street, which is unlikely to ever meet the 60 kilometre per hour criteria unless there's significant changes. The next one is main streets. So we actually only have one main street in our district that's within our jurisdiction, and that's Main Street in Foxton. And again, the speed limit is 30 or 40 kilometres an hour with a default of 30. For it to be 40, we need to have an on-street cycle lane or a separated cycle facility. Right, so the next type of roads are peri-urban roads. The example here is Manukau Heights Drive. The speed limit's 50 to 80 kilometres an hour with a default of 60. For it to be 80, it needs to be sealed with a marked centre line and straight with a carriageway width of 7.6 metres or curved with a carriageway width of 8.5.
oh, we're testing.
I think that's about 7. It wouldn't meet 7.6. No sir. So peri-urban, if that's an unfamiliar term, you kind of think of like a rural residential area. Like it's not quite urban, it's not farmland. It's a bit in between. Yeah.
So the next type of road is rural roads. So these provide access to rural land and in support of rural land use activities. So this default speed limits is 60 kilometres an hour. So you could have 60 to 80. For it to be 80 kilometres an hour, it needs to be sealed and have a marked centre line, be multi-lane undivided, curved or straight, and needs to meet the rural land use criteria. So this here is North Manukau Road. This would meet the criteria for 60 kilometres an hour because there is no marked centre line. So this is currently 80, this road here. And our last type of road that we have within the districts is rural connectors. So 60 or 100 kilometres an hour with a default of 80 kilometres an hour. An example is Waikawa Beach Road. These types of roads provide a link between rural roads and inter-regional connectors, so State Highway 1, and will be feeder roads into townships. So that, for example, Waikawa Beach is joined to State Highway 1 by Waikawa Beach Road, so it's a rural connector. For it to be 80 kilometres an hour, it needs to be sealed with a marked centre line and have edge-lined pavement markers or edge marker posts. For it to be 100 kilometres an hour, it needs to be median divided, and that is a physical median barrier, and it needs to either be straight or curved. So before we move on to the program, does anybody have any questions on the rules?
If we don't agree with that and our other regional partners do, we're going to be forced to do it anyway, aren't we? Because it looks like we're going to have to align with our regional partners regardless of what we decide.
Yeah, that's correct. Eventually, I don't expect the Regional Transport Committee to take a hard line on anything that's not the minimum criteria set by Waka Kotahi for this speed management plan. There may be councils who are doing wholesale every rural road 60, every urban road 30, but I don't think that'll be the majority, and I think the Regional Transport Committee, in my own opinion, would probably not look to reject someone who is a council that is following the rules for this SMP.
But if we wanted to go 80 and 40, for example, rather than, against those rules, I suppose.
Yeah, I think probably not in this SMP, unless you'd like us to make some significant changes. But probably in the next one, we'll be likely having those conversations with the rest of the region and Waka Kotahi, unless the rules change.
So the only question I have on the rules is, it appears that these are just prescriptive rules and they're not at all data driven, so that it don't actually say, look at your crash data and go, where are your risk spots? Like, it's completely just one size fits all based on what I call stupid criteria, rather than actually looking at it and going, yeah, like, where are the black spots?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of the guidelines, I couldn't really. I probably don't know enough about the process that Waka Kotahi went through to set out those guidelines.
So you've said that you've called them guidelines,
Well,
not rules.
So are they
Guidelines or rules?
Oh, they're called rules. Sorry, I got my words wrong.
That's a quick one, James. So under this proposal, the likes of, say, Wiley Road and Maitawiti Road have recently gone down from 100, and all our rural roads, 100 down to 80, would remain at 80.
So I don't think we're currently looking to change in this SMP any roads from 80 to 60 under those rules, except one little particular part in Oho, which we'll cover off. But I think parts of Wiley Road will be wide enough to be 80 still, but there'll be other roads that we've changed from 100 to 80 that will not meet the criteria of staying 80 unless they're widened, or if they're wide enough, they have centre lines marked and new edge marker posts on them.
Yeah, I use both those roads as examples because they're both quite wide. Now we've upgraded widely. They carry relatively light traffic. And I know a lot of us at that end use those roads because they're damn sight safer than State Highway 1, reality. So, and not a lot of people stick to 80 either, to be fair. But,
James, I mean, taking Taco Street as an example, would we go and talk to those residents and say, do you agree that your speed limit should be reduced to 30 k's?
One of the things that we're proposing, we do have a few slides later on that talk about our potential engagement approach for this, is that we were looking at doing some form of letter drop for anyone that was going to be directly affected, because the last thing we'd want for those people is suddenly to have 30 signs go up with no prior warning.
My only issue is here around the consultation and how we engage the communities about it, and I think Bernie touched on that. But the one for me that really sticks out is the lack of data, as you say, that brings these processes to us, because one of the things I'm really concerned about is the timeliness of being able to move around our district. But the most important part is actually emergency services and emergency response times. So that for me is critical in terms of, being a part of other parts of our district and roading matters. That's always been the number one point about human lives. Yet we are putting limitations around how emergency services move. And I watched it only 2 weeks ago on Furukino Bridge when an ambulance was unable to get past the traffic because there was nowhere to go. And so, in my mind, I'm just thinking, how does this stuff sit with our emergency people and how they need to move throughout our district? I've got other comments, but I'll say this for later.
Yeah, those are good points, Justin. We have had a bit of correspondence, and we've met with staff from New Zealand Police about enforcement primarily. And I think you're touching on some really good points around the sort of downstream effects of these regulations, because if these regulations say we want a road that's required in a median barrier, the median barrier is going to be quite a big barrier to emergency services if they're in a high traffic situation. And I think if we're in that situation where we're deciding we want to put our own median barrier on a local road, we'd have to really consider the emergency services and consult with them. But as well, we'd have to be considering just the general speed limit changes and the effect on congestion and how that can affect emergency services. We don't expect significant congested areas with the SMP we're proposing this year, but when we do get into those areas around Levin, Foxton, key intersections that have already pretty poor level of service in terms of delay times, we'll definitely be looking at consulting with emergency services.
I suppose the other question that raised for me, James, was currently, if we look at Porotafo as an example, going off the rules that you just showed, there's a huge resistance by the community to have median barriers put in place at all. And I think they've produced enough evidence to justify why. But I also think that if the council, based on what's been presented here today, we're actually sharing that with that type of a group, where, so currently there's 100 k's, and so a barrier can be put in place, but in that rules it said there if it was 80 k's, then all of a sudden a barrier wouldn't be required. So what I'm signaling is council could actually, in their foresight, be saying to a community group as such that actually if council supported an 80k, because that will become a local road one day, I don't know when, but if it does, then we wouldn't have to go for a speed review process again, because actually we're already preempting that. One, the community could live with an 80k. Two, they're not going to have any of the barriers put in, which means that all those concerns that they raised around emergency services, school, logistics, farming and agricultural logistics. All of those things are actually almost mitigated just by having that speed in place. So it's just something that sort of came out when you were talking.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's good feedback for when we look into when Waka Kotahi come out with their full speed management plan, not the interim, and we'll be very interested to see if they've got plans, State Highway 1 North of Levin, between Levin and Foxton, because they've got these improvement plans, and are they considering further speed limit changes, and is it either or both together? That would be quite interesting.
Alright, so we've got a series of maps that we're going to go through, and this is what we are proposing. These are the changes that we are proposing to make within the first 3 years of the plan. So anywhere around a school, we have already approached the school principals to see what their feedback has been. Overwhelmingly, it's been positive for what we've suggested the changes around schools to be, and where there have been changes that principals have suggested to be made, it's normally been that there's been an extra entrance to the school that we weren't aware of. So they were actually asking that we extend the area slightly to include all the entrances. So the first area that we're proposing to make 30 kilometres an hour is in the Manukau Township. So in the yellow there, that is the school. All of these roads are narrow, well, the vast majority of these roads are narrow. There is only a footpath on this road and this road here. The rest don't have footpaths, and we are anticipating that there would be support from the community, as it has been something that has been asked for in the past. The next place that we are proposing as a local road to make 30 kilometres an hour is Waikawa Beach. So this area over here, so this is from the current 50 kilometres an hour. This is all 50 here, and from about here, it's currently 60 around here. We were also, so what we're proposing is to make this 30 kilometres an hour, given that, again, there are very few footpaths around here, and when people are using the roads, they are walking on the roads, and there's often bikes and kind of that situation going on. One thing we did want to ask your thoughts on is what to do with Strathnever Drive here. So this is currently 60 kilometres an hour. Yeah, so while we are not necessarily going to have a choice about eventually it will need to go to 30, like we said at the start, we have an option about the timing. So we can make all of this area here 30 and then bring it to 60 there, and then somewhere around here drop it back to 30 for this area here.
There's no threshold in terms of traffic volumes. Waikawa Beach would probably get, I don't know how much volume, but it wouldn't get a huge amount. I see little.
Why would we prioritise it?
Yeah, exactly. It seems an overkill.
Can I offer an alternate perspective? Because, this is legislation that came from the government that we pretty much have zero control over. And much like the putting the fluoride in the water thing, we all may have had different views on that, but we went, it's the law, we've got to comply with it. The rule that they've passed is pretty clear. It seems strange to even have to consult on it when there aren't really any options to be consulted on for most of these things. There are slight tweaks on some of these where we might be able to go up 10Ks or down 10Ks, but yeah, But yeah, well, we're mandated to do it. We're mandated to make this plan. We're mandated to do it in time and submit it to Horizons on that time frame, and do it all at once as a whole district-wide thing. Well, don't we have to make a speed management plan for the lines? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, happy to hear officers' comments, but yeah, I mean, the rule says that we have to make a district-wide plan and that we have to submit it and that we have to comply with it. I'm confused as to how much input or say or consultation can actually be had on this. It's kind of more facts-based. Yeah, so just on that, and just before we answer that, I'll add this one there too. So I think I heard you say that initially we could keep it at 60, but eventually we'd have to take it down to 30 anyway. So can you just, answering Rogan's question then, expand on?
Yeah, so effectively I mean an RE Nova where they're including this thing called the One Network framework in the presentation. It basically shows you how roads get classified, and except for Waikawa Beach Road going off there to the east, every road in that picture is effectively the same One Network framework category, which is local street. Strathnaven might feel quite a bit different in reality. To try and explain it without showing you diagrams, basically you look at, you score a road by a movement function and a place function, and the movement function goes to 1 to 5, the place function goes to 1 to 5, I think, and basically 5 is sort of State Highway 1, 20,000 vehicles a day sort of thing, and moving 1 is just a quiet local road. And then place would be, 1 would be the place function isn't significantly important. There might not even be driveways, it might be a rural area where it might be predominantly agricultural use. And then you go all the way up to 5, where it might be sort of the CBD of Auckland or Wellington, where you've got probably more people moving on foot than they are by. So there's little blocks within this grid of the two scores. Wherever you sit on the grid is a different category. So if it's sort of moderate place function but low movement function, it sits in the local streets or local roads category. And the speed limits that are in this in Wakaputa's rules are set by the ONF, the One Network category. There's quite a long explanation for that, sorry.
So can you just answer Rogan's question in terms of Rogan's view was that the legislature says we have to do this anyway, but you said earlier on, as I understand it, there's the thing we have control over is when. So we could do nothing. Well, we have to do some mandatory things, but then you'd have to do everything for a 2027 to 2030 plan in 3 years' time, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Councillor Boyle, was your suggestion to is your question around whether we should make all the changes now?
My question is, doesn't the rule prescribe that we have to make a whole network approach and submit it in a speed management plan and have it approved and have all our roads compliant with that rule?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there is a timing element to us making the change other than we have to comply with our territorial authority, which needs it done by 2024. Yeah.
So one of the things that Waka Kotahi has said is that they would like us to take an iterative approach. So if we actually changed all our roads all at once to the speed limits that have been outlined in the rules, it's unlikely that these speed limits would be able to be enforced, because it's going to be such a change for everyone and wouldn't actually result in the behaviour change.
Okay,
So-
so to clarify, NZTA have said that we don't have to comply with the rule? Because I can't see anywhere in legislation. Yeah, I mean, we get to talk to them in 40 minutes, so it'd be great to have that chat. But yeah, to me, the legislation says on legislation compliant with that. Yeah. I'm not quite sure how an iterative approach of not complying with some of our rules, our speed limits with the law, would be accepted in a manner that to be network-wide. Not that I want it that way. I like going fast.
Yeah, okay, so I believe the legislation is it's to have a plan to meet basically the rules as set up, but it's not. They don't. They have the, like, you do a 10-year transitional plan and then a 3-year operational plan, sort of like a long-term plan where you actually set the operative budgets for the 3 years, and then you have a longer-term plan that's more indicative, because it will be changed in 3 years' time potentially, or not. So it's a similar process. So the requirement is to get to a point where all of our roads are conforming with the rules. But it's neither practical or probably it would be neither practical nor as useful nor as effective to actually make all the changes at once, as Justine alluded to. The consultation and actually physical works of changing the speed limits for the whole district in this one plan would be very difficult, and making all the changes at once, it may result in some
But is
compliance
that the
issues.
window that they've allowed, 10 years? So do your plan district-wide, that's the first step. Then you say, well, you're going to phase it across this many years to implement. And then we're going to concentrate on what we'll achieve in the first 3. Is that really?
Yeah, we are still, in terms of the long-term plan, it's still a little unclear from Waka Kotahi, but what we understand it to be is that we have 10 years to do it. They do keep changing things a little bit on us.
10 years to do what? Sorry, 10 years to develop, implement
your
or
plan.
develop the plan?
Implement.
Right, so just in the interest of time, I'll just move through. So our next suggestion for local roads is OHAL.
Maybe just coming back to kind of where we need to get to and where this will come to. So, like, this will come to a decision point of council at the 21st of June meeting, and so some of that, some of those options, like for example, one you've just suggested at Rogan around the go fast and do it once versus phase it in. I think what I'm hearing is that we need to provide some advice to councillors about those different options.
Yeah.
And the compliance.
If we don't have to comply for 10 years, I'm pretty happy to not do anything.
Yeah, but you're looking for some firmer advice.
Yeah.
But
Maybe
it
what
also
we're just offering right now.
it comes down to cost. We can't afford to roll the whole thing out in one go. It's the reality. We're just about to strike the rates, and we prepared for that. So, they've obviously given us rules, staged opportunity, all of that. So, I mean, I don't think we're in a position realistically to do the whole thing at once when it comes down to how much it's going to cost.
While I don't agree with doing the whole lot at once, I certainly believe that the schools need to be the priority. So for me, I'm not interested in the rest of it, but I certainly think if we can provide what's required to do our schools, then I would definitely move towards that.
Yeah, which is why we need to feed into the priorities in the first 3 years.
Okay. Yep. Thanks for that. So, in terms of, we're probably not in a position to provide advice on what the plan for 27-30 will be, or 30 to 33, and whether or not some changes could be pushed out to them. But what we can provide advice on is the requirements that we have to meet during this period, and as we go through the individual spots, we can tell you exactly what parts we are required to do and which parts we've sort of added on because we thought it would be sensible or it fits the situation.
James, I just wanted to draw your attention. So I'm looking at the seating speed limits rules on NZTA's page, and I've gone to the summary of submissions. And just looking at one of the questions, do you think the content requires are appropriate both for full and interim regional speech management plans? If not, why not? And then there's a whole list of scenarios and feedback that's been collated. But in the bottom of the recommendations, one of the explanations says that they seek a further explanation from Waka Kotahi is required when an RCA proposes a different safe and appropriate speed limit to the safe and appropriate speed recommended by Waka Kotahi. So I don't know what the outcome of that is, but there's a question in there right now about what are the rules we're allowed to stipulate for our district, because obviously it's being challenged here by some of the other councils. There's quite a few of them noted in here. So I'm just sharing this, just having a little look at what's in there.
Sorry, I know we're slowing this presentation down, but I've jumped straight to the end of the presentation, and what concerns me is it says draft SMP will be presented to EMs on the 21st of June. For me, that is not good right now, because we haven't even agreed the approach to what we want to prioritise. So I think that's what we should focus on, which is like, where's the level of comfort around the table? Do we go to the bare minimum? Do we go to the phased approach, or is it the full shebang? Like, that's the dialogue, rather than getting into the specifics of the streets and stuff. That's just my take. I don't know what others think, but I wouldn't want to see a draft SMP turn up on the 21st of June until we've settled this conversation, because I think this is like the crux of the issue is why waste our time developing something that's got a whole lot of detail to it when the comfort level might be, here's just this is the approach we're going to take. Sorry if that's real blunt.
Yeah. I think you're right, and the read of the table kind of feels like it's a do what we are required to do, schools, and there's not terribly much else that we'd like to see in a draft SMP. But I imagine the SMP kind of hopefully show what minimum is and what logical things you guys have added as officers, and not have a whole lot of things above and beyond our requirements. But I don't know if we need to spend half an hour looking at maps of individual streets if they are all the bare minimum that we're required to do. I would like line by line on extra bits we're adding. We've added an extra 100 metres here. That'd be nice to know, and it's got to go through a consultation process anyway with the people who are actually on the street and know about it and care more about it than us. I'll stop talking. You guys can talk. But I think we've covered a lot. Maybe enough. So bit by bit for me today is around schools. Agree that schools are the priority, and it would be good to just look at the implications and the roading network around those schools, because I think there's some questionable inclusions. So I'd suggest that as a next step.
If we've got time, are we okay for time?
Yeah, it's important, so we'll make time. And obviously, part of the reason why the team put out the workshop ahead of today was that so that elected members could read it, look at the maps. I wonder, James, whether rather than kind of going through all the slides, why don't you facilitate a conversation that is, okay, so if schools, if we're going to do what we have to do, and we all accept that schools are the priority after that, what then comes next, and what are the trade-off decisions, or just so that we can get a feel for the table as you start to further draft that SMP, and just picking up on Councillor Allen's point.
That could work Well, I think I might give you a bit of commentary on how we've come up with the proposals we've come up with, and give you a high-level explanation of what we've done and why what we've chosen and why we've chosen it. So we went through all the schools in the district that have an entranceway on our local road, and we looked at the existing school zones where they have the yellow sign with 2 people crossing the road, and those would be the absolute minimum areas for speed limits. We then talked to the schools about other potential entranceways, and if it makes more sense to cover a block, or if there's 2 schools next to each other, is it useful to cover a wider area? And we also looked at areas where it's obvious that if there's kids who would go to that school, they'd be walking through those roads to get to it, and we're particularly keen on making those sorts of changes if those roads were minor roads and they weren't having an impact on, say, a collector, a main thoroughfare road. So started off with schools, looked a little bit wider to capture areas where we think there's a lot of kids walking to school or cycling to school or what have you. And we've looked at, in addition to the schools, we've looked at Waikawa Beach as almost a little self-isolated, sort of sets itself up to be within the rules little community, not a lot of footpaths, quite a lot of narrow roads with the exception of Strathnaver, and not a lot of traffic volume, but that is definitely something that we're not required to make in this SMP period, and if the general feel is to not include that, we can prepare our consultation document with that in mind. Foxton Main Street was another big one, and the Harbour Street and all the east-west roads running off it to the west. So Foxton Main Street is a main street. It's quite busy, but it is a big wide road, and after the excellent work that was done to it in 2017, 2018, it's significantly safer than it was before.
It is pretty slow through there already.
Yeah, it is pretty slow through there already. Is another good point.
Is this mandatory? Sorry, is this mandatory or not?
No.
Part of it here will be mandatory.
Because that's the school.
Yeah. Yeah, further north it's mandatory.
Yeah, so you've got the school on Park Street and
Yeah.
Lincoln Street.
So my question around that is Harrington Street, the inclusion of Harrington Street. What's the logic for that?
Oh, yeah, sorry for that. We've taken an iterative approach to this presentation, and after some feedback internally, we actually altered it in the one we got today, but the version you've got is slightly earlier, so we've not included it on this version.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, we were. I mean, in our innovation, we did like it where we've got it here primarily because you can put it in a good place that's visible for a long stretch. Where if you have included Harrington, you can't really find a good place to put the speed limit sign. And where we've got it starting on this slide is, although it's quite close, it's very close to the Manawatu College entrance. It is where the school sign starts, so it's right on what the minimum is.
Would they be permanent fees or variable?
Permanent, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, can I just go back there? And here's an example in the Bedlington Red District, I'm sure. That is a main thoroughfare, obviously.
Yes.
There is a huge amount of traffic.
Yes.
And I understand 30 schools in the belt. But you can holiday periods and whatnot, not just 30 necessary. People aren't going to stick to 30 unless the school's in, Is there an opportunity to look at a variable if that's the case? Because I think you get far better outcomes from one of those flashing signs to to a signpost. I know there's extra costs in that, but this is just the conversation probably needs to be had.
I think we can be within the rules of the variable speed limit on this particular case.
Can confirm, permitted in the plan.
Thank you.
So that's it.
We can, but like we said, this area eventually will all become, because it's all classified as a local road, it will eventually all become 30.
Yeah, and it is worth thinking about if I suppose when that happens, we'll have invested probably 30 grand in electronic signs if we put electronic signs up.
I think you can feel the allergic reaction though, James, to the fact that there's a blanket thing going on here where I don't think anyone actually knows that it's a blanket and it's not being very well communicated at all, that that's what's been expected of us to make a decision on.
So we've probably got 15 minutes left in order to make sure that we have 10 minutes before Wakakotahi join us at 4 o'clock. So I wonder whether we just check in with the table, just what would be the most useful of your time in the next 15 minutes in order to be able to give the direction that officers need. I'm wondering whether we're not, like there might need to be an additional workshop in order for us to be in a position to bring a draft SMP. Just wanted to see this from the table.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm happy to signal that I'm going to support a draft SMP coming on June that shows anything other than the mandatory or the minimum requirements at this point, because I'm just not going to support it at this point. Like, and someone will say that it's predetermined, but I'm just not going to, because it doesn't feel right. It's not data driven. I think there's a justifiable basis around the schools, and I think that even though the legislation says that we might ultimately get to a point where that is, there's still scope for change to NZTA policy. There's change of potential change of government, all that kind of stuff. So for me at the moment, it's just doing the bare minimum, and that's all I want to say at this stage.
Yeah, I'm probably a lot the same. It's just, I'm sure you guys are frustrated as we are. It's another example of central government trying to control everything in our lives, and it's just nuts. As much as I'm all for road safety, some of this is just. But I think what I'm interested in is understanding what you need to do to, and the organisation needs to do to ensure that we're complying with our obligations as they stand, but also catering for what Sam said, because 5 months' time, and some time after that, it might be a different look, But certainly schools are always going to be the priority, and
Okay. So what I'd propose then is that, so if we don't meet the June 21st, we're going to have to ask Wakakotahi for an extension of time on the process, and we're potentially putting the regional council back as well. And we'd like to avoid that, but if that's the case, that's what we have to do. But what we could do is put the proposed SMP that is solely the minimum. We could put that to you, and we could continue along that basis. And if there is an appetite for extra speed limit changes later, there is the mechanism of doing a interim speed management plan partway through the 3-year process. If the appetite changes and wants to see further speed limit changes, we can revisit that potentially as soon as July next year. Does that approach sound worthwhile?
Yeah, I mean, given it's a draft document that's got to go through consultation and then be amended after the people on the streets provide the feedback that we need to make the decisions, I think a bare minimum to meet our requirements sounds like a great thing I'd like to see. You could potentially include some logical recommendations. Yeah,
It's data-driven.
an extra street around the school kind of thing, and maybe highlight those in the draft SMP as not required, but do we want to leave them in around?
So we're talking about the minimum practical option.
and we'll just acknowledge that we'll take the risk that there could be further engagement required and shifting of signs and modifications in the future. But if there's a clear logical reason to extend it now without significant cost, we'll include that as that BPO option that we'll bring back to the 21 June. So we'll look to circulate that in advance, but we're still looking to stay on that time frame.
That's good.
All right.
It's not. And it's not to. It's. I just want to make sure that it's not to devalue the work that you're doing in the space, because I think ultimately it's we have to do it, but it's just. Yeah, I think it's. Get it right.
We felt some frustration at an operational level through this process. I think we can say.
Definitely, yeah, very good.
The other thing we just want to cover off is
So we just wanted to just confirm as well that we will be including the speed limits, that we need to confirm the signposted speed limits, so that will be part of it as well.
which we already went through a consultation process for those changes in the past, and it's just a bit of a administrative error that we're fixing up. So the other thing we wanted to talk to you a little bit about is community engagement and how we approach that. So Palmerston North and Kapiti are both going through it's the interim speed management plan engagement currently, and they've had some particularly mixed feedback on their engagement. From what we can see, the Palmerston North has taken quite a forthright view of being honest to say that these are government regulations that we're required to do, and we're changing, but we want your feedback on them. And their engagement has been perhaps a little bit more positive than what we've seen in Kapiti, and Kapiti have a bit more of a strident plan. They're taking on quite a bit more than what Kokotari are relying on as the minimum. So we would propose to, we have to engage with our community, it's one of the requirements, but we're suggesting a Let's Kōrero page to provide information, web page, online forms for submission, social media posts, sharing with community pages, a Facebook Live event for people to ask us questions, a letter and pamphlet for people directly affected, media releases, a one-page community connection page, and just website updates as we go through the process. Perhaps a newspaper advert and a video for our YouTube. So these are all options. We won't necessarily want to do all of them, but is there anything that you see through here that you think isn't going to be reaching part of the community? Or
James, I think that just one of the things that we should include there is like some pamphlets or like a document that goes to all the schools that can be sent home with every single student at those schools. And I think Rogan's previously suggested, like, just have a QR code so they can on the phone and then instantly provide a response to a survey or something. I support this or I don't, because that's going to give us much, like direct feedback from the people that are going to be hopefully the beneficiaries of this. And then the other thing that I'd seen another council do is, and this guy in Waititi Beach has got one of the electronic signs, like that are on the trailers. And so they put it up in the street saying, this zone is going to be, we're proposing to change this zone to 30 Ks, what do you think? And then it's, tell us what you think, which was a good way of actually getting feedback from the motorists who are actually using the different areas, and they've moved it around parts of the district.
yeah, okay. We'll take notes of that and discuss it with our comms team.
Just in your reference to the comparison between the way you shape the message in Kapiti and Pens as these examples, for me, I'd err on the side of, I'm I'm confident that the community will back up our priority around schools, and there won't be, negative feedback around that. But in addition, communicating to them that is by and large imposed. And so, yes, we'll listen to your feedback, but some of this we have to do anyway. It's about compliance, so we don't get the end of the stick. It's a bit like how we positioned ourselves around 3 water reforms. This is being done to us, and take it up with them if you've got a problem.
Following on from that, are they paying for the consultation since they're imposing it on us?
This is a particular sore point for me, myself, Bernie. But when I asked this question probably 2 years ago, when Waka Kotahi started engaging the industry about this plan, I distinctly remember being told that we can resource this through existing budgets.
Just on the online submission stuff, to do that, can we just put some perhaps hard copy submission forms at the libraries?
Yep.
Because first, every time you copy the neck, not everyone's online. Most people are. Just to cover them. Then we can say and reference so that their communications.
Yeah, certainly.
I was just going to note that I actually support these review processes. I think they're really important and they give us a way better understanding of what's going on in our district and with our roading. So thank you for all the work you are doing. I was just going to note actually the behavioural changes I've noticed in the district since we've reduced a lot of our local roads to 80. At first I was a resistor. I go fast too. But I think it's actually turned out to be really good, and I'd be interested to know if there's any data being gathered about the change since it's been brought in terms of accidents and things like that on those particular roads, if it's actually curved downwards. And the other one I just wanted to note is how important it is working with our Māori community. 2 examples for me that comes to mind is the 30 restrictions on the beach that would never have happened if we didn't have that speed restriction implemented. And I think the other one is the marae safety work that council did. I think should also be celebrated, because that was a real win in recognising the dilemma a lot of the marae were facing during times of high use. And on top of that, James, you're quite aware that NZTA and yourselves now trying to work around traffic management plans for those marae, and I've actually been asked to help with that on that side. And I think that's really important because it's going to complement not only the areas we're talking about prioritising today around your schools and I think hospitals and things, but marae definitely need to be captured in that, because it's going to depend what our roads look like going forward as to what that means for us. And the last one I wanted to make a statement around really was Māori roadways and easements, James, and it's really just for my fellow elected members to understand the dynamics that brings for you and our contractors, because when I think about the time and energy that's been spent around Clay Road, and the same pothole that we met initially over is still there today, and I ran into it this morning and nearly blew my tyre. But anyway, how many years do we have to sit around and talk about one little pothole, but no one wants to take responsibility of who's responsible for that piece of road? Is it NZTA? Is it council? Is it the Māori landowners? Who is it? But I'm just putting it out there for our whānau that it's not what it always seems.
Yeah, wanted to echo the comment on multi-contribution to creation plans. 3.1 of the rule says we have to establish and maintain a process to provide opportunities for Māori to contribute to preparation. So if anything, they should be here at this stage. If we're talking about a draft plan, they should be contributing to the preparation of that, which will be real fun to get done in less than a month.
So we, at the very start of this process, the reason that we sent the original memo out to you all was that was the point that we started engaging with our iwi partners. So we have gone to them, we have received feedback via Neville. What's his?
Neville Heihei, Te Mata Kahuki Navigator. I think we've also worked with Aroha Pākau, engaging with more local tribal authority. If I was to summarise the feedback, generally very supportive of reducing speed limits around schools. We did raise issues around speed limits outside marae entrances in particular, but generally the response we were having back was that they were fairly comfortable with the speed environment outside the marae entrances. I can't comment if we've got like consistent feedback from every single marae, but we did get a good amount of feedback from a number of marae.
Just thinking, making sure Te Kore here too, because they're not part of either of the other two groups. So just making sure we're touching base with you too.
Yeah. And Te Kore is a tricky one. We can engage with them on our plans in general, but because the entrance is solely on the state highway, we can't unfortunately change the speed limit outside Te Kore. Any more questions on this? I think we've pretty much exhausted the topic.
Thank you very much.
Alright, thank you.